Don't miss your chance to win big every week on The Zone. This week on Win Ticket Wednesday, you can win a pair of tickets to see Sturgill Stimson at the Maverick Center on September 17th. Listen to The Zone all day Wednesday for your chance to win. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone, and we are joined now by Frank Dolce, the former Ute quarterback. Frank, good morning.
Morning.
Frank, are you stressed? Are you worried? Are you excited? Are you anticipatory? What is the word you feel? 2 games down, 10 to go in the Ute season.
Well, that is a really good question. I feel a little bit like it's deja vu all over again with the hand injury, another injury. By the way, have you guys received any updates? Like, what are the updates that we're getting on this?
None. Kyle Whittingham will not provide any.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay, so here's my guess. Cam Rising is not going to play against Utah State. He's going to rest his hand. And I don't know what the injury is. So, and so we'll see Isaac Wilson and maybe somebody else. Who knows? And if that's the case, if Isaac's playing, Utah still should have a pretty fair advantage over Utah State, just because of the defense Utah brings to the game. But and so I would still think Utah wins that game. And then after that, we'll just have to see the evolution of Isaac Wilson or whoever else. Like, he hasn't necessarily demonstrated yet the ability to, manage the team like Cam managed the team. So I guess an answer to your big question up front is, I don't know. I'm feeling a little concern about the quarterback position, and now I'm feeling even more concern about the running back position that I've been talking about for a long time. Although I think Mekhi Bernard has probably taken the lead in that area, I still don't feel like Utah has a ground game that's dominant.
Yeah, I can buy that. Bernard is just a kid of slight build, so it makes you wonder how much pounding he can take throughout the 12 games and 13 and 14 and however many they could end up having and certainly want to have. But as far as Rising, Kyle's talking about, he's so competitive and all that stuff. And it's like, okay, but does that mean competitive has to be reckless too? Is there a fine line there that you can use that competitiveness to your advantage and not become reckless with being competitive?
I think all of us would like to see Rising make some better decisions when he's running around with the football. And maybe it's just not in his nature to play that way. And so you just, you just have to live with it. Utah fans just have to live with it and hope that when he gets injured, that it's not going to be, season ending or multiple game sort of scenarios. And hopefully that's the issue here, is that it's the kind of a one game early in the season, get yourself really healthy to start conference play.
I think, and I don't know, but I think you're wrong about him playing. I think he's going to play. And I don't know if you were watching on TV or if you were at the stadium, but people were at the stadium told me, and this is, I mean, we're really trying to be a detective here, right? He got someone, when the stadium is like 75% empty at the end of the game, someone yells out, and you had to be over to that section to hear it. Cam, are you okay? And he gives him the thumbs up, right? And his demeanor when he went to the locker room, he was not happy. He was serious. He was worried, concerned, pick the word. When he came back out, he was laughing and joking with his teammates. I think he got good news. And I don't know what Vegas knows.
Like it wasn't broken?
Right. Yeah, it's not broken. And there were multiple people who said they saw blood. So he's got some kind of cut, laceration, whatever. And then I don't know what Vegas knows or how they know it, but they got Utah as a 21.5-point favorite. Utah only wins that game by 21 if they have Cam Rising. The offense, when he's off the field, I don't see it. We've watched the second half of the Southern Utah game and the second half of the Baylor game. I don't see them winning by 21 points.
How many points can Utah State score against Utah defensively?
10.
A touchdown?
10. I was going to say 10.
Yeah, so you're saying that Isaac Wilson needs to score 31 points. That Utah offense needs to score 31 points. Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I still think Utah has enough.
The reason to be stressed is he's played 28 games, and I've seen him leave 4 times with an injury. Because I think you're right about it not being in his nature. He ran 25 yards and took the hit. He was trying to run out of bounds, but he took the hit. He doesn't slide. He doesn't drop to the ground and give himself up. He doesn't do it.
No. And it's hard to take that away from him. It's hard to tell him to not play that way because there have been plenty of scenarios when that has been so advantageous for Utah offensively, for him to figure out a way to get an extra yard and run somebody over or take a hit and keep moving forward. And so it's really, really difficult to turn that off. So I don't blame him at all. I mean, in fact, I would say I would rather have him play that way and risk the injury because that's just who he is. And then everybody else just has to deal with the injury that comes along with it, unfortunately.
It's football. Once you run out there and get out, take a play, you're going to have a possibility of injury. So you have to play, and whatever happens, happens. There's times that you can use your brain. I just didn't like the play he got hurt on. There was no need. You weren't going to get anywhere. There was no play to be had. You weren't gaining positive yardage. I mean, the last 2 injuries, the Rose Bowl injury, he wasn't even hit. So things can happen. I asked Kyle about how you can get Wilson up to speed, and he said, the standard procedure is practice. The starter gets 80% of the reps. Does Cam Rising at this point need 80% of the reps? Can they do something to hasten the development of the youngster by maybe going against the book and not going with the starter if Rising is the starter that particular week? Whether he starts this week or not doesn't really matter. It's the availability once you hit conference play. That is the big deal right off the start with the 2 games against Arizona and Oklahoma State in reverse order there. But can they get the kid up to speed more in practice, or can that only do so much and it has to come through game experience?
Yeah, I think the practice is helpful to make things second nature. And so when you step out onto the field, you're not thinking so much. And if they can get Isaac to that point, I think that's really helpful. And now he has some fairly significant game experience that he can lean on in practice and understand the difference in the speed of the game and the intensity of the game and how to prepare for that. So I think all of that is helpful. And at this point in his career, does Cam Rising need 80% of the reps? I doubt it. I mean,
do his receivers? Do they need that repetition with him?
I would say that the The wide receivers, it's probably more important for those guys in terms of the timing of the routes. Tight end group, probably not.
Right, he doesn't throw to receivers anyway. We do this every freaking year.
He's going to throw the tight end.
And Singer's going to be this, Pittman's going to be this. They're going to be who they are.
Remember when you told me that in week 1 that Coach Witt said that
the throw game's going to run through Singer.
Yes. And
Money Parks, 80 yards of receiving. It went to Money.
I don't know if that's materialized yet.
Yeah, and Moolah Parks has been there with them, and they had all summer to do that.
Yeah. They
could do it 8 hours a day during the summer. How much do you need?
It's like you're saying, hey, Cam Rising, slide and go out of bounds and don't take a hit and become a different quarterback. You're also saying what it sounded like at the beginning of the season. We're also saying is like, hey, Andy Ludwig, change what you've done and have been really successful with at Utah and change that around this year and make that different. And I don't know if you can really change that. Although I will say this about Coach Ludwig. He went to a bunch of other programs and he had to adapt his style. I think that was supremely helpful for him.
Yeah, he's talked about that.
Utah.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying he can't adapt, but I'm saying his success at Utah has been based in powerful running game, athletic quarterback who can make a play, tight end usage, and occasionally find a wide receiver running around open somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't want to see this season be derailed by a Cam Rising injury, and if that were the case, somebody's got to be held accountable for it. And is it more the freshman quarterback or the coaches?
Well, when you put it like that.
Wow. Somebody has got to be held accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do you mean accountable for him getting injured?
No.
Or accountable
if the season gets derailed by an injury to the quarterback. Hopefully it doesn't.
Again.
Nobody wants to see that. Maybe some idiot BYU fans, but the rest of us, we don't want to see that. I'm saying that there has to be some level of accountability to have it happen. You have to have somebody ready to go.
Yeah, that's on the coaches.
But the hardest thing to do is get a true freshman ready. And that apparently has been the plan.
I don't disagree with that. And so when you think about like getting a true freshman ready to play this football season feels like a coaching staff that believed that Cam Rising was not going to be injured. And so you didn't go with someone who has a little more experience, game experience, whatever, life experience, whatever it is that could be helpful in that scenario. And so I thought that was interesting that was the direction they went right from the beginning. And who knows? Maybe this changes some of that thinking. Maybe this little injury changes some of that thinking in the locker room about who should be next man up in the quarterback position. I don't know.
Do you have any other worries about the team, or the rest of the team is functioning at a pretty high level, so it's really keep Cam in there so they can keep rolling over people?
I think the defense is playing at such a nice level right now, and they're going to continue to improve. Like, whenever you bring that defense along, you're going to give yourself a chance. So to me, still the biggest thing is Utah going to be able to develop a run game? A run game to me is going to be the thing that takes all the pressure off of whomever is playing the quarterback position. And so that is, I know I've been harping on that from the beginning, but that's still my biggest concern. And to your point, PK is like, is Mekhi enough? Is he durable enough? Is he big and strong enough? or does that wear out at some point? I'm still waiting for that, whoever the guy is or the other guy is to emerge. And by the way, this isn't unique. We've seen this happen with Utah football over the years, especially with Coach Whittingham. So we're going to be in three games in now. We've done this in the past, and someone finally has a breakout game. So I guess if I have a concern, I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed that is going to happen this week. That some piece of the running game, dominant piece of the running game emerges.
Oh, I think it'll happen. They'll just move some linebacker or safety over, and he'll rush for 250 yards, and away you go.
Why not?
How about
By
this?
the way, as we're speaking,
Caleb Lohner, the biggest running back ever in the history of football.
That would be Refrigerator Perry.
Okay, you got me there.
But yeah, I mean, why not? By the way, as we're talking about the running back positions, have you guys been following Jaquindon Jackson at all? I mean, the guy's had
following him into the end zone 3 times in the first half at Oklahoma State. Yeah,
you did.
Yeah. Okay, so this guy has 200-plus yard games in his first 2 weeks at Arkansas, and to me, I don't blame him for leaving, finding something else, or whatever the issue was. He had the injury bug at Utah, but that guy, when he was healthy and with the football in his hand, there's no question that he was the lead running back. And so I'm not saying like, oh, I really had Jaquindon back. I'm saying we need to identify someone who has that same sort of talent and ability in the backfield.
Yep, I agree.
Frank, we'll leave it right there. We appreciate it. We will talk to you again next week.
Absolutely. You guys have a great week. Talk to you soon.
All right, Frank Dolce, former Ute quarterback. Coming up next, Shehan Jeyarajah, national college football writer for CBSSports.com, will join us. DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone.
It's game week for the Utes, and the Zone is getting you ready for kickoff. After a long layoff, the Utes and Aggies will resume their rivalry with a battle in Logan. Listen all week long for the best coverage of Utah and Utah State football, and your chance to win tickets to the game. Then catch the Ute pregame show this Saturday at 1:30 on 97.5 FM, and the Aggie pregame show on 1280 AM, with the postgame shows immediately following the game. Your home for the best coverage of Utah football is live on air, online, and on the KSL Sports app. This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
DJ and PK brought to you in part by Lumen Technologies. Your life moves fast. Quantum Fiber Internet is faster. Move up to tomorrow's speed today. Go to quantumfiber.com. That's quantumfiber.com. One more week, PK, before a full slate of conference games. Do you know anything about Big 12 teams you didn't know before? Anything you're buying, anything you're selling? Or anything you're just more convinced of? Oh, yeah, what I thought in August before the games, it really is right.
Well, when you look at 2-week evaluations, you then have to understand that is possibly changed at 4-week, at 6-week, and 8-week, and so forth. So, yeah, I think you can make some evaluations based on 2, but you have to understand that they are based on 2, not 10.
DJ and PK, we're joined right now by Shehan Jeyarajah, national college football writer for CBSSports.com. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good to have you on again. We are all trying to figure out the Big 12. It is BYU's second year and Utah's first year, and half of the league can say we're in the first or second year in this league. So as we sort all this out, who are you really impressed by early in the Big 12 season?
Well, I think that to kind of go off board a little bit, I think that Arizona State through 2 weeks has been way better than I expected. I picked them to be the second worst team in the Big 12, only behind Houston, or ahead of Houston, rather. But they have looked really good. They look further along in the trenches than I expected. I think Sam Levitt's been pretty good at quarterback. So I think that's a team that potentially has a chance to go from potentially the cellar to at least maybe be in that middle class and compete for a bowl game. I think that you also have to be really impressed by what Iowa State has showed so far. I picked them as my number 2 team in the Big 12 heading into the season. Kind of went out a little bit on a limb there, but through 2 weeks, especially after beating Iowa in a really competitive game with a fantastic second half performance. I think that they've showed exactly what I wanted to see from them. So those would be my two right now that I think have jumped off the page, are Arizona State and Iowa State.
Who was that first team that you were impressed by? I didn't hear you.
Okay, fine. He's a Sun Devil. You're just playing into the shtick here. We all groaned when you said that. Inside, every listener to this show was like, oh,
He broke up. I didn't hear. I heard Iowa State. What was that other team?
Why?
I forgot. We'll check the tape.
Yeah, well, we'll see what they can do going forward. But that's, as I said, as you were joining the show, you make these evaluations after 2 weeks, and knowing that after 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and so forth, that these evaluations that you make right now could change. That's the beauty of the season, is there's a lot of twists and turns that we get to follow for all of these teams. As far as disappointment, maybe Texas Tech?
Yeah, Texas Tech has been a wild disappointment so far, of course, and in week one, barely beating an FCS opponent in overtime. Now, I will mention that the Abilene Christian has a lot of actually former Texas Tech players, so it's a bit of a revenge spot for them. I was willing to write it off as essentially just one of those weird games, but then week two happens. They go on the road, get absolutely destroyed by Washington State, look completely unprepared on both sides of the ball. This has been, for sure, one of the most disappointing teams, not just in the Big 12, but I think in the country so far. And, I think that another team that I just want to look at, and I'm not out on them as yet by any means, but I really expected more from Jalen Daniels going on the road for Kansas against Illinois. And for him to struggle the way that he did, I still think that Kansas was clearly the higher quality team and just made too many mistakes. But it puts them really behind the eight ball now, I think, when you start talking about them, whether it's being in playoff contention, being the type of team that can go and win the Big 12. These are just the kind of mistakes that you couldn't have, especially early in the season. So I do think that, again, Kansas is by no means dead, especially since it was a non-conference loss. But I think that certainly they have to be up there with Texas Tech as teams that have disappointed me so far.
So the team that has confused me the most is Houston, because Houston was terrible against UNLV, completely dominated. And granted, Vegas may have one of the best, if not the best team in the school's history. But nonetheless, Houston got dominated. So you figured they're going to get annihilated at Oklahoma, and that was a game.
I think that while I give a lot of credit to that Houston staff, I think for having a good game plan against Oklahoma, I do think that this is a big Oklahoma problem as well. I think that their offensive line has been a disaster. And that's one place where you expect Houston, I think, to be pretty decent is potentially in that defensive front. They transferred in a lot of really good pieces. But, again, like you said, UNLV might be maybe the Group of Five's best team, maybe the best team in the Mountain West. I wouldn't be shocked to see them at the end of the year be in contention for that CFP spot from the Group of Five. So, like you said, it's hard to evaluate exactly what they are, but I think that what you do have to credit them for is I think that they've been really well coached, and I think that they've been really well prepared for the moment, even when it hasn't always been pretty. This is still a roster that I think is pretty far away, and ultimately I do think this is still probably the worst team in the Big 12, but I'll tell you what, my bottom two teams in the Big 12 coming into the year being Houston and Arizona State, it suddenly looks like that bottom's a lot better than I thought it was.
I'm really intrigued by Kansas State, Arizona. Now, it's a non-conference game in the manner that Utah and Baylor were this past week because of prior contracts needing to be fulfilled. But I look at Kansas State, a little bit of a struggle to beat Tulane. And Arizona, man, my gosh, they didn't do a whole lot against Northern Arizona, a Big Sky team, obviously. So I'm looking, and I want to watch this game to see where the legitimacy is, where the weaknesses are, because even though it's not a conference game, it's two conference teams, and we extract things at this point of the season, whether or not they come to pass, but it's still what we do. And I'm looking for implications in terms of what it'll mean once we get in the heart of conference play beginning next week, even though it's a non-conference game. What are you looking for out of this game?
Well, I think this is a huge game for Arizona. They actually are probably another team that belongs on that list of underwhelming teams so far in the Big 12. Last week they only beat Northern Arizona by 12. And again, it is an in-state rivalry game. Like, they do get up for that game, but it is an FCS opponent. And the week before that, New Mexico scored 39 points on them. And so this is an Arizona team that I don't think has come into the season as kind of ready as I expected. I think that a lot of people thought, hey, after winning 10 games last year, this is going to be pretty turnkey for this new coaching staff led by Brent Brennan, but it just hasn't been so far. Week 1, it was the defense. Week 2, it was the offense. I think that now heading into a game against Kansas State, which certainly looked vulnerable last week when they traveled on the road against Tulane, arguably should have gone to overtime in that game if not for a controversial call. I think that Arizona really has to prove that they're ready for this moment. Because I think whatever you want to say about Kansas State, they're going to improve over the course of the year with a freshman quarter or a first-year quarterback. Arizona, they're supposed to be ready right now. This is supposed to be the team that comes in with a lot of returning experience and a lot of key playmakers. So I do think that Arizona is the team that I need to see more from than Kansas State. And if they just go and lose pretty big, I'm totally out on them as a contender.
So a league game that actually is a league game. UCF at TCU on Big Fox. They're both 2-0. UCF scheduled 2 wins. Both Utah and BYU have to go to UCF later this year, and Utah is going to play TCU, although BYU isn't. So these teams have been pegged in the middle of the league, but we know sometimes teams in the middle of the league collapse, and some of them take off and can challenge for or win a league. What do you think of them, given that you don't have much to go on? Maybe TCU at Stanford tells you something.
Well, I do think that TCU is improved from last year. I don't think that they're going to miss a bowl game again. But, UCF, this is going to be a great first test for them. I said coming into the year, their offensive line is going to be the thing that decides how far they can go. And like you said, the first 2 weeks, we haven't really learned a lot about them because they haven't played quality opponents as yet. TCU, I think, is a good first test. They're not going to destroy them, certainly, on the defensive line, but they have talent there. I think that defensively, TCU has been playing pretty well overall under first-year coordinator Andy Avalos. And so I think that if UCF is able to move the ball pretty effectively in this matchup, that says a lot to me about what this team has the potential to be. I think, UCF was one of those teams that I really thought could jump from that middle class to the top of the conference. And frankly, so could TCU. They are talented enough to make that happen. So I think that this will be a game that tells us a little bit, hey, which one of these teams has the potential to move above. But, again, if UCF has a big game, I think that you have to put them potentially right on the edge of that contender tier.
In the Pac-12, and even going back to the Pac-10, it's a conference I've followed my whole life because I went there and grew up in the area, that you could always count on what I would call 2 or 3 head scratchers as far as, wow, I didn't see that coming. And I'm wondering, I don't have a good feel on this conference yet the way I did based on 40 years of experience in the other conference, but do you see any of these teams, maybe we end up with a Houston and ASU towards the bottom and Colorado, we don't know what to make from them. Do you see any upsets down the line that could have a major impact on who represents the conference in Dallas in December?
Oh, there's no question about it. I think that when you think about this conference, first of all, like you mentioned, the bottom of the league, if Arizona State and Houston are starting right now at the bottom of the league, well, I think anybody down the stretch, and I'd even point to that, for example, Kansas State-Tulane game. Kansas State was picked almost unanimously as a number 2 in the conference. Oklahoma State is a number 3. They should have lost to Arkansas. So I think that this is a league that is almost guaranteed that we're going to get a game like that. And point to last year, Oklahoma State went and lost 45-3 to UCF in the month of November. They managed to still make it to the conference championship game, but it really threw things out of whack and threw their place kind of into chaos. And it also, I think, eliminated them for all intents and purposes from consideration for the college football playoffs. So I do think that's going to happen. I'll point to one team in particular where I'm curious if that's going to happen, and that's Iowa State. They were my number 2 team coming into the year. I feel pretty good about that pick right now, but they play 2 road games that I think could get a little spicy for them, at West Virginia and at Kansas. And I think that that's definitely the kind of matchup that could make things just a little bit interesting, is if they go and they lose that kind of game. The other thing, too, is that I think that you have to look at Oklahoma State potentially late in the year. They've really struggled with focus at times over the past year and a half or so. Like I mentioned, the South Alabama loss in week 3. They go and lose to UCF the way that they did last year. I look at a game like that. I mean, Oklahoma State, I wouldn't be shocked to see them, for example, go into BYU on October 18th and just kind of take it for granted and get beaten to a pulp in some ways. I think that that's potentially a huge swing game. And, teams that aren't necessarily always ready for that environment or that atmosphere, I'm curious if that's going to be a night game as well. Actually, I think it's already scheduled as a night game as well. And so I do think that that's the kind of matchup as well. I think BYU definitely has a chance to be a real chaos agent with some of the matchups that they play.
I also work at a TV station, and I get to see the TV ratings locally for the over-the-air stations. I don't get to see the cable stuff. And there were probably, I think there were 11, maybe I'm off by a game. I think there were 11 games over the air here. And obviously the Utah game was the most watched. The second most watched by a fairly wide margin was Colorado. That was a terrible game. It was over early, but people watched it. So on behalf of all those people who watched it, if you had to say Colorado, bowl team, not a bowl team, I'm thinking you're taking not a bowl team right now. But is there any chance Deion somehow gets his team to 6 wins?
Well, I was pretty high on them being a bowl team coming into the year, but their first 2 weeks have been just awful so far. I'm kind of shocked how bad it's been, especially, again, you talked about them replacing their entire offensive line. I was definitely wary of that move, but I think there's a good case that they've been worse on the offensive line this year than they were last year. So, the pathway to them making a bowl, I did always project them losing that Nebraska game, though not as badly as they did. But I think it was North Dakota State, Colorado State. They have to win that Baylor game. They have to win that Cincinnati game. I think that they probably needed to win that UCF game to have much of a chance. And then they had to pull an upset somewhere. Well, all of a sudden, that looks a whole lot tougher than it did a couple weeks ago. Cincinnati hasn't been a pushover necessarily. I think, Baylor is certainly a winnable game, but I think that, Baylor's front has been playing all right so far this year. So if they're able to cause some issues with Colorado's offensive line, that makes that game a lot harder. And UCF has been way better than Colorado to this point. So it's getting harder and harder to find out where those 6 are coming from, especially since, by the way, at the end of the year, they play Kansas State, Arizona, get a respite with Cincinnati. At Texas Tech, maybe that's a winnable game now, but Utah at Kansas, Oklahoma State. Like, it is one of the tougher second half of the season that anybody's going to play in the Big 12 this year. So I think if I had to pick right now, I think they miss a bowl game, but a lot of moving pieces left, especially if they can start to improve, which isn't necessarily something that we've seen from Deion Keene so far.
How real is Texas? Because they have looked really good.
Yeah, they're very real. They're very real. I think the big question for them is, especially at that running back position, are they going to have the depth to make a true title run? Because they are already down 2 running backs, scholarship running backs for the season. They lost another, at least for a stretch, in that game against Michigan. But if they're able to be all right at that position and just have bodies back there, they've got one of the best offensive lines in the country. I think Quinn Ewers is playing incredibly well. He showed real improvement to me from 23 to 24. And then defensively, I mean, this was a team that I thought had a chance to continue to grow on their defensive performance from last year. And so far they have. So to me, they are fully deserving of being in that tier with Georgia and Ohio State as the legitimate contenders in college football. If you ask me, who's most likely to win a title, I'd probably still put them behind those 2 teams, but they're right there with them. And I think at least at this point above everybody else behind them, whether the Alabamas, the Miamis, whoever you want to talk about. So I think that they're a very serious contender. After beating Michigan, I think they pretty much locked up, certainly have to win some games, but locked up a spot in the playoff with a chance to win a national championship. And the way that they were able to go in there and specifically abuse that Michigan defense tells me, hey, this is a force to be reckoned with.
USC and UCLA made the first move and changed the Pac-12, and then Oregon and Washington made the move that killed it. Oregon and Washington both have in-state games. In both those games, everybody's 2-0 in those games. Who's winning? And will there be any payback in some small way from Oregon State and Wazoo, who got left behind?
Well, I'll tell you what, that Washington State team, they're a little fun. They're a little plucky out there, and they're the one team that didn't lose their head coach. Although, by the way, their athletic director, Pat Chun, actually left to take the job at rival Washington. So there will be no shortage of emotion for Washington State heading into that game. I think that they have a very real shot to win that game. Washington has not looked awesome so far, and Washington State has been pretty impressive. And then I think you go to the other side. What's going to be interesting in the Oregon State game to me is that Oregon State, of course, they promoted their defensive coordinator, Trent Bray, to their head coach after Jonathan Smith left, and they have been playing really aggressive, especially in that defensive front. And Oregon so far has been a disaster on the defensive front, on the offensive line. And I think that Oregon State definitely has the ability to take advantage of some of that. I think the big question for me will be, can Oregon State generate enough offense to still have a chance to be in this game and win this game? I think it's certainly possible, but these are the kind of rivalry games that, they're the sort of things, if you win this game, you're going to be talking about it for the next 20 years. So there will be no shortage of emotions in this game. I think that both are certainly capable of pulling monumental upsets.
Well, we will leave it right there. It takes forever to get through these big leagues. I'm not used to these 16-team leagues. 8 league games coming up in some weeks. It's unbelievable. Shehan, we appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us once again. We'll talk to you later this season.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Joining us from CBSSports.com, Shehan Jeyarajah, to talk a little college football. Coming up next, we're giving away free food on a Cafe Rio Taco Tuesday. Stay tuned. That's after the break. More college football on the way. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone.
Hut, 20 team. Hike, 20. It's game week for the Cougars. And the Zone is getting you ready for kickoff. After a battle against SMU, Kalani Sitake and the Cougars hit the road to battle former Mountain West Conference rival Wyoming in Laramie. Listen all week long for the best coverage of Cougar football. Then catch the Cougar pregame show this Saturday at 6, with a postgame show immediately following the game. Your home for the best coverage of Cougar football is live on air, online, and on the KSL Sports app.
Yeah, boy.
This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
The Mr. Mack Utah County High School Player of the Week is celebrating the best player from, wait for it, Utah County. This week's co-winners, Orem High School quarterback Tayden Cava and Spanish Fork High School quarterback McKay Smith. Cava passed for 4 touchdowns and ran for another as the Tigers routed West Jordan 56-17. Smith threw for 288 yards and 5 touchdowns as the Dons blow out Uinta 56-26. The Utah County Player of the Week award proudly presented by Mr. Mack. No one buys, no one sells, and no one cares the way they do. Absolutely no one. Is it just me, Jake, or did we just go from running high school quarterbacks all over the state, and I couldn't figure out why people weren't throwing it here more, and it seems like in a 5-year span now, everybody throws it, which is probably an overstatement, but lots of schools are airing it out.
Yeah, the era of Roger Dupay is over. Long gone.
It took a long time to end, though.
It did.
But it's over. So there's a lot of QBs throwing the ball.
I filled in for Hans and Scotty on Football Friday with Coach Mack and Alema. And Ron McBride talked about it. He said the training and the overall just, I don't know how you describe it, the environment of high school football around the state, he said it's morphed. He said there's money being invested in it. Players are more apt to spend a lot more time working on their craft. And he said that the overall play, especially in quarterbacks in the state, has gone up as a result.
Yeah, way up. I wonder how many more college quarterbacks will be produced here, and you need the size, you need the arm strength. It's not just the coaching.
He actually said that he thinks there's going to be more and more guys coming out of the state. They're going to play either it's here locally in the college ranks or they'll go out of state to play. He thinks that they're going to see an uptick in it.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. PK, did you have a license plate you wanted to tell us about?
No.
Good. We'll just sit here quietly for the rest of the segment. And you, think some deep thoughts to yourself. Maybe meditate, possibly.
I seen a license plate the other day.
Yeah.
WWJSD.
What would John Stockton do?
Leave Joseph Smith out of this.
Oh. No and no.
Are we on the right line? Are we on the right path?
Founders of religion versus guys who don't want vaccines. Yes, you're dead on.
Tell John Smoltz to take it somewhere else, okay?
Did you know the person who drove this? I mean, how do you have the definitive answer?
Because
you didn't give us all the clues, although you will now mock
you know
us.
how you have a license plate holder?
Yeah.
The frame, yeah.
Frame?
So if you have the frame and the license plate, then it becomes easy to figure out.
Is it John Smoltz?
It is not John Smoltz.
John Smoltz. How random was that? Nice.
You're JS, come on, we're going.
Hall of Fame baseball player, yeah. It is not John Stockton, although it should. You know, depending on what your persuasion is.
What would Jerry Seiner do?
Ooh.
He owns car dealerships. His name on car dealerships. You've watched ads. You may have blanked out, but
I didn't know it was Jerry, though. I got the Seiner.
it was just because he's a license plate holder. He bought it at a Jerry Seiner dealership.
Well, you've mentioned the right sport, and you've mentioned the correct first name already. I thought that'd be a dead giveaway.
Basketball player named John, not Stockton.
No.
Oh, baseball.
Baseball.
No.
I can't even remember what we said. You know how
You
get
mentioned
the
the right first name, but it wasn't John.
Joseph?
No.
Jerry?
Yes.
Oh, Sloan. What would Jerry Sloan do? Oh, he says on the license plate. What would Jerry Sloan do?
That's awesome.
That is confirmation of what that means.
Yes.
That's funny. It's a personalized license plate holder. That threw me. I thought it was going to be something about a dealership or company or something. I hadn't seen a personalized license plate holder. Maybe I haven't looked close enough. You know, you see them like people wear them, have them for their schools. USC people especially. There's a lot of USC Trojans up here on the Wasatch Front, and they love their license plate holders. I've been behind a bunch of those at stoplights.
I got one for my wife early on.
Yep.
Teachers do it with class.
And did you like that?
Yeah. But that's a good credo to live your life by.
What would Jerry Sloan do?
Yeah. Bite your head off.
Well, we know what happens if you cut somebody off on the freeway, right? You bleeping, bleeper.
Yeah.
Bleep, bleeper.
There was a guy who achieved so much through work.
Yeah.
That's it, through work.
Yeah.
Look what you can do if you commit yourself fully to something.
His life, that phrase right there, even more than work. Not that the work was wrong, but I think that's dialed him fully committed.
Yeah.
All in.
Yeah. And look how much he achieved.
What would Jerry Sloan do?
Yeah.
Work harder. Grab his lunch pail and head to work.
Yeah. Shut your mouth.
Bounce
and
back.
go to work.
Bounce back from failure, frustration,
whatever it might be.
bad luck, whatever.
Yeah.
Bounce back.
Yeah.
Take a punch. That sucked. Well, next.
Yeah.
Let's go again.
I can see why somebody would have that.
Yeah.
And it made me laugh when I saw it. And I took the picture of it.
DJ and PK, there are all sorts of people telling you all sorts of things. Sometimes it's obvious about your football team. Sometimes it's not quite so obvious until you think about it. We will get to that next. DJ and PK, Yak, you want to give stuff away? It's a Taco Tuesday. Cafe Real gift card $20 right now. 801-575-ZONE. 801-575-ZONE.